Hi, welcome to my YouTube channel and podcast. I'm Rosenberg. Today I'm going to do a review of my 11-stage self-love recovery program, or my Codependency Cure program. I'm going to do this because I often talk about different elements of what I do, how I do it, techniques, strategies, tricks, tools, all of which fit in each individual stage. But my goal through YouTube and my podcast is to teach you guys about self-love recovery. So just to start off, let me set the basics out there. I've renamed codependency to self-love deficit disorder, or SLDD. Similarly, I've renamed codependence to people who are self-love deficient, or SLDs. The name fits the problem. It doesn't shame the individual, and it's more accurate with the actual disorder and its symptoms than the name codependency. I've written extensively on the history of codependency and how it never really became what it should have been in my latest book, The Codependency Revolution, Fixing What Has Always Been Broken. But let me get to the point of this video. Everything that I do as a psychotherapist is with people who come to me, call me, email me, find me on the internet, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, podcasts. I post a lot of content, and they notice that not only do I understand and explain codependency, or self-love deficit disorder, I explain why the SLD keeps doing it over and over again. The human magnet syndrome, the name of my second book. But people often confuse the fact that I am the guy that knows all about the human magnet syndrome and why narcissists and codependents, or narcissists and SLDs, come together, and all of the complexities that are in this book. And for those who are listening to my podcast, I just showed a picture of my human magnet syndrome book. But really what I do is I'm a psychotherapist. I created a program, a set of techniques, strategies to overcome, neutralize, solve, and cure SLDD, self-love deficit disorder, permanently, completely, forever. And that is why I claim to have what I call the codependency cure. In other words, my approach, my treatment program identifies the problem as it is in all of its manifestations. And you guys have heard me talk about it in many, many videos and podcasts about the self-love deficit disorder pyramid, or the codependency pyramid, or explain to understand the problem. You have to understand that at its basis, at the very base foundation, is attachment trauma experienced as a child because you were raised by a narcissistic and codependent parent. And from there, it's core shame, fundamental feeling or belief that you're not good enough and not ever worth being loved. From there, it's pathological loneliness, this existential disease of pain just for being who you are and not fitting in the world. And from there is a compulsion and addiction for a relationship to make the pain or loneliness go away, and that's self-love deficit disorder addiction. And from there, on top of the pyramid, is everything that we know and see about self-love deficit disorder codependency, which people mistake for the problem. Well, I created a 11-stage treatment program, and each stage is built upon many tasks, goals, and objectives. And in order to get through one stage, you have to solve these goals, you have to master them, so you have the necessary tools and abilities to get to the next set. And this goes all the way up to the last stage, and that is self-love abundance, which is the cure. That is a permanent manifestation of self-love abundance, which is the opposite of self-love deficit disorder. But because the cause of SLDD was completely remedied, neutralized, that person cannot, will not, and should not ever return back to those lonely, core, shamed, disassociated times, because it's been resolved. And that's why it's permanent. It's not a permanent state of happiness. That's unrealistic. But a permanent state of self-love abundance, where it is self-reinforcing, that you built upon it, you keep it going. So what I want to do, just as a review for some of the guys who are listening to this for the first time, who are kind of new, I want to go over the 11 stages, and I want to do it rather quickly because I do have a 5-hour video, a seminar video, an educational audio and video product where I explain this in very minute detail. Stage 1 is hitting bottom and introducing hope. This is when the SLD, the codependent, comes to terms with how broken they are. They believe, they feel utter hopelessness, complete shame, fear, anxiety, gaslight, and trapped in a relationship and not even know how trapped they are. Or they could be outside of a relationship because their partner broke it up, terminated, or they did. Nevertheless, stage one is when someone feels so low, they've hit their bottom. It's a concept used in 12-step groups. You hit your bottom, there's so much pain, there's nowhere to go. And because of that, you realize that maybe just because it's so bad and there's so much not to look forward to, maybe you can grab onto a ray of hope. Maybe you can reach out, and you do. That is stage one, hitting bottom, reaching out for help. And then if they contact me in my treatment program, I'm introducing hope. I focus on acknowledging how much trauma and pain, how much suffering they've had to endure, and how absolutely courageous, if not miraculous, it is that they're reaching out and asking for help, even if they're scared and not even sure they're going to do it. The idea that you can ask for help is something that codependents, people who have self-love deficit disorder, they have been gaslighted either by their partner, who did this purposely, strategically, or by the history of the disorder itself. I've written in all my books, when I talk about how codependency or SLDD comes about, when does it start? Well, it starts in childhood, when you find that the only way that you can satisfy your narcissistic parent or keep that parent from being hurtful or harmful, or to get love, you got to mold yourself and be someone else. And you've lost yourself. At the point of your life when you're just starting to figure out who you are and understanding this emerging identity, it has shifted into you are for the narcissist. You are not for yourself. You don't know how to and to stand up for yourself. And should you, you know always, because you've seen it in the family, you've experienced it yourself, there are consequences, harm, neglect, deprivation, narcissistic injury. So when someone is a codependent or an SLD and they come to my material, they are in tremendous pain and suffering. They have given up, but something triggered, something activated hope. And that is my stage one, hitting bottom and introducing hope, explaining that there is more, there is possibilities. It is possible. You can stop the narcissist from hurting you, maybe by not just controlling the narcissist, because you can't control someone who's uncontrollable, but you can find a way to mitigate, buffer, and eventually remove yourself from the situation that puts you in harm's way. So in stage one, it's all about hope. It's about building up someone's spirits. It's about saying, you can do this. You got it. It's during that stage I offer what I call my Surgeon General warning. Of course, I'm not a surgeon nor I'm a general, but if you see in America, United States, a pack of cigarettes, there's a warning. And it's by the top medical professional of the United States. They call it the Surgeon General. It says, if you smoke, you'll get emphysema, heart disease, and pregnancy problems. That's the warning. Well, I give that warning. My Surgeon General warning is, if you continue in this program, you risk losing many people you thought you loved and who you thought they loved you. And then I explain to them, well, in the loss, the shedding of these relationships is the possibility of self-love and happiness. Moving to stage two is the mastery of my written material. It used to be the mastery of the human magnet syndrome content, but and I'm holding up my books, but since 2024, specifically in April, I published my newest book, The Codependency Revolution, Fixing What Was Always Broken. And that stage is all about information. It's learning. You cannot change your SLDD. You cannot solve the problem, the dysfunction. You cannot heal in the areas that you need to heal in order to overcome this horrible, never-ending problem of SLDD. You have to learn. You have to learn about yourself. You have to learn about the pathological narcissist. What type of pathological narcissist are they? Do they have borderline personality disorder? Do they have antisocial personality disorder? Do they have narcissistic personality disorder? What personality grouping? What subcategory? And I've created subcategories, and many of you have heard the different subcategories: covert narcissists, subcategories for SLDs, active codependent or SLD, passive SLD, is to understand who you are and why you are. Why is the narcissist the way they are? And why can they never see that you have a voice, you have a right? Why don't they have empathy? Why is everything conditional? There is no way that you're going to go through these 11 stages and be successful and not know the mechanics of it all. And so in this stage, information is important. I'm explaining gaslighting. I'm explaining narcissistic abuse. And it could not be more liberating as people learn about their SLDD, learn about why they are so burdened and feel trapped and brainwashed. Everything starts to change, but they might not be able to get out of it. But it opens up their mind, because with an explanation comes the opportunity to find a solution. I should say, and let me just digress a little bit, as much as I explain each one of these steps or stages as discrete, as unique, doing them when I am involved with a client in the program, it's not a black and white, okay, now we're up to stage 2, let's get going. It's not a linear process. There is, in actuality, as I am trying to manifest and someone's right for self-love abundance, I am trying to work them through the pain, the trauma, to build the resources to eventually be self-love abundant. There are twists and turns. But this video and all other educational videos on my 11-stage program is to explain it to the layperson or the therapist. And I can't explain my intuition and how I kind of go a little bit here and a little bit there. That's what all senior level or advanced level psychotherapists know. And that's to go with your gut, your intuition. But this is the stages, this is the direction, and this is how it works. So after the information stage, the mastery of the human magnet syndrome and the codependency revolution content comes overcoming pathological loneliness. Pathological loneliness is absolutely horrendously painful. It's this bone aching, sad, lonely, empty feeling. I call it an existential disease. Everyone who is an SLD knows about this. It's the feeling that they had before the relationship. It's the feeling that they're scared of having after the relationship. It is when they are not in an intimate relationship and they have to face the whole package of who they were and who they became, and the shame and the angst and the sadness. It manifests in this deep, searing loneliness that actually physically hurts. So stage 3 is addressing and overcoming pathological loneliness. Stage 4 is understanding, explaining, and neutralizing gaslighting. What I've come to understand that gaslighting, whether it is the classic gaslighting where the partner, the narcissist partner, has sociopathic traits and they purposely and consciously try to manipulate the SLD's mind to believe that there's something wrong with them that either didn't exist or did exist in a mild condition, that because the narcissist's manipulation of the environment and the SLD gets them to believe that they are impaired and broken and helpless with this disorder. And as the narcissist proves to the SLD they have this and manipulates their environment, they get the SLD to believe that they're hopeless and that because of this problem, no one's going to like them, love them, or accept them. And that is when they represent themselves as the only one that will. So they manipulate them into believing something terribly is wrong with them, that they can't stop it. People will not like it. People will reject them. And they create this false narrative that the only person that will love them unconditionally is the narcissist. And therefore, the SLD falls prey to deep, deep loneliness, shame, fear, and hopelessness. The next stage is broadening social support systems. This one is just a black and white, concretely obvious stage. You cannot proceed in this program just by therapy by itself. As much as I try to be a resource, a support, a cheerleader of sorts, an SLD in recovery needs much more. They need to be around people who are not threatening, who are not going to overcome their need to find an identity, independence, individuation, someone who's not going to exploit them, someone who's not going to conditionally love them, and should the SLD not give them what they want, reject or abandon them. No, just simply learn about what SLDs never experience or rarely experience, which is just friends, a support system, a community of people who you like, who you admire, who you hang out with, who you chill with, not necessarily very close best friends, buddies, soulmates, but to learn for the first time what it's like to be around people who are just supportive. And I introduce at this time my idea of the friendship circles, and that there are different levels of friendships or relationships, and that it's really important to build friendships and relationships with people and not necessarily be very, very close and tell them everything. So during this stage, I give a lot of instruction, a lot of homework, a lot of encouragement to get SLDs to believe that they can make friends who will just like them and not hurt them. This is not easy. That's why it's a stage. And through this stage, they then become more prepared for eventually confronting the narcissist and having the fight of their life. The next stage is preparation for the storm and the development of predictive awareness. This is the learning, preparing, chess playing, strategizing stage where now that you know about yourself, you know about your SLDD, you know about the narcissist, you know about the dynamics that bind you, that feel like they entrap you. You've learned so much about why you feel so chronically sad and lonely, but yet are in a relationship. You are learning what the narcissist does should you set a boundary, what will happen when they counter your attempts to leave. As important as stage 2 was in learning information about the human magnet syndrome and my basic theories and discoveries, this stage is to learn about what happens when you start implementing boundaries, when you start implementing this well-devised, well-planned escape strategy. Everything relies on prediction. And that's why I created this concept called predictive awareness. To survive the next stage, which is setting boundaries in a hostile environment, you have to be able to predict what the narcissist is going to do in response to the many things that you are doing and how to outsmart them, much like playing a chess game. So in this preparation for the storm and building predictive awareness stage, you are practicing, you are role-playing, hopefully me or a treatment provider who's providing you this type of therapy, the plans, the strategies, and you are playing out what happens and preparing for the worst case scenarios. If you can predict the narcissist and you know if you do this, they will do that. If you don't do that, they will do this. You can be ready for the hardest stage of all, and that is setting the boundaries. Narcissists are really easy to predict when you're on the outside. people have joked with me. Some were serious. They asked me, am I a mind reader? Am I a psychic? How did I know that was going to happen? And I explained to them, as I explained to you, that it becomes really obvious once you've gone through these stages and you start planning for each element of your escape plan. The narcissist is predictable. And as predictable as they are, so is the SLD. And because of that, we look at old reactions, old knee-jerk reflexes. What did my SLD client do when they tried to leave before? How did not only the narcissist sabotage them, but how did they self-sabotage? And so we look at the reaction of the narcissist. We look at the SLD's reaction to the reaction, and we go steps ahead. Predictive awareness, preparing for the storm. And this stage could not be more crucial, because once all of that work is done, then execution is not nearly as terrifying. The next stage is setting boundaries in a hostile environment. That is when the stuff hits the fan. That's when the rubber hits the pavement, whatever saying you can think of. That is when everything up to this point where you are ready, you are prepared, you know what's going to happen, and you have mitigated as much harm as possible. You have talked to as many people to protect them, whether it's your children, to protect yourself, to protect your bank account, to protect potential friends that could be triangulated. You have contacted an attorney. You've done research, and you are ready so that when you do pull the trigger and you say, I want to break up, I want a divorce, and you do it in the prescribed manner, which is not direct confrontation. It's using my observe, don't absorb technique. There's all sorts of strategies that go into actually pulling this off, making this successful. So in this stage, it's setting the boundary, keeping from being pulled into the narcissist, what I call the wrestling ring. It goes back to George Bernard Shaw saying, don't wrestle with the pig, you'll get dirty. And besides, the pig likes it. Well, it's the acknowledgement that the narcissist's number one strategy in breaking the SLD down, if they're trying to leave, is to get them angry and into a fight and get them to want to hurt them. Because in that fight, they lose their power. They lose that perspective of how to defend themselves and not self-sabotage. And the next stage is resolving the attachment trauma. This stage is based upon the understanding that the cause of SLDD is attachment trauma. That is the trauma experienced in childhood at the hands of the narcissistic and codependent parent. The trauma has been stored. It has been put away in a part of the brain that is not accessible to talk therapy. It's not accessible to memory. It's blocked away, much like PTSD. You just can't get to it. The brain hid it. We call it disassociation. It removed it from your awareness so that you don't have to remember it and suffer the emotions connected to the memory. But because it's disassociated from our memory and placed in another part of our brain, namely the limbic system or specifically the amygdala, I developed a technique to get there, to move a person into the memory that they could never have reached, felt, explored, and eventually bring forward or integrate. I have a 6-hour seminar all about trauma and the healing the inner trauma child method, or the Hitch technique. And that's actually one of my favorite seminars. These seminars, like the other ones, they're audio or video, are available at Self-Love Recovery Institute's website at selfloverecovery.com. So healing the attachment trauma responsible for the SLDD, it becomes possible because all of the defense mechanisms that have covered up these purposely forgotten and buried trauma memories. The brain buried them because, and it's hard to explain because it happens mechanically, but the brain makes a decision that it cannot resolve the trauma. And just by having it available in memory, it causes incredible stress and anxiety. It pushes it down. So to address that and explore it, and then safely, but painfully, but frightfully, to then bring it into my client's awareness, to discuss it, and then to integrate it into their memory systems. In other words, they're able to remember what happened, how badly they were hurt, and their experiences. They can get to those memories through just regular talk therapy. Through the Hitch method, I am connecting to the part of them that was traumatized at the age that they were traumatized. I'm talking to a little child. And when I am connecting to those memories and connecting to what I call the inner trauma child, the itch, I am giving that part of them a voice. They are reflecting exactly what happened, their feelings, in such clarity and such detail. It's as if I'm talking to that child. And in that moment, in that relationship of talking to the child, I am working through like a role play of the person with that child, the client, promising to care for that child or protect that child, and convincing that child that he or she can come forward into memory and know that their older self will take care of them. And through this stage and through these exercises and technique, there is an integration, a memory, and the ability for my SLDD client, who's no longer terrified and scared of memory, to embrace that child, to embrace their past, to embrace that part of themselves that were so wounded and traumatized, and to take care of them. And when they come back into their conscious awareness during session or when I'm actually doing the Hitch method, they remember it all, and they have this awareness that they take with them of their relationship with that part of themselves, that little child. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And the next stage is arriving at self-love abundance. This is when it is a cure. This is when SLDD, self-love deficit disorder, is not around anymore. Everything that created it, everything that supported it, everything that made it has been neutralized, has been worked out, has been solved. And over time, there has been this progression, because it doesn't happen in just one moment of epiphany or a watershed moment, but gradually a self-love deficiency becomes less and less. And as that becomes less and less, this emerging feeling of self-love, an attachment to oneself, a confidence about oneself, a belief in oneself. And by this stage, they are actually feeling what I call self-love abundance, and do not identify with the SLDD, the loneliness, the shame. It's a miraculous part of the treatment program. My clients smile with a smile that they haven't had. The way that they think, the way that they feel, the way that they believe about themselves in current time and the future has permanently shifted. It's not like they're a different person, but there has been a progression, so much so that the foundation of all that which made them so self-love deficient isn't there anymore. It's been neutralized. Newer experiences of self-love and self-care have been built, and the person is no longer an SLD. Now, this doesn't mean they're happy and running around and, jumping up with joy or something unrealistic. People with self-love abundance still have problems. They can be sad, they can be depressed, they can have problems, but they love themselves so much and are committed to taking care of themselves. They find a solution, whether it's a solution through their own doing or getting help. It's a beautiful moment of treatment. It's my favorite. I love it. The next stage, stage 10, is bringing self-love abundance into relationships, or what I call self-love abundant mutual relationships. Up until this point, my clients have been discouraged to be in a relationship. In fact, I have a no sex, no intimacy relationship that I try to sell early on in treatment. And I say it's a rule, and I say they have to do it, and everyone balks at it and has a difficult time. Selling the no sex intimacy rule is hard, and I'm not a stickler. I say no, it's against the rules, but when people do it, I kind of roll with it. And more often than not, I help them understand their weakness involved in breaking the rule and being open to what is going on as they are sucked back into the next relationship, which almost always is inevitably with a narcissist. Almost always. Now, the no intimacy, no sex rule has been lifted, and I encourage my clients to consider intimate relationships. It's not like I'm saying, go out there, go get someone to have sex with, go be intimate, go jump into a romantic relationship. No, it's like they now are a new person with a new awareness of themselves. They are naturally protective because they are self-love abundant, and they're not going to let anyone mess with it. So it's addressing a brand new stage of their life, like riding a bicycle. SLDs never have been in relationships when they loved themselves, when they were healthy. They've never been in relationships where they can set boundaries, where they can, when their picker is fixed and they can know who to stay away from and who's safe and who's not. It's almost like they're a teenager, 17, 18-year-old or early 20s, where you're just experimenting and learning who you are through these relationships. And it's not easy, and it's a challenge, which is why it's a stage. And some of my newly self-love abundant clients, they go in it with a lot of fear and anxiety, and some are excited. But all of them have ups and downs. But none of them are excited where they're going to let someone come into their life who's going to upset this newfound sense of emotional freedom, self-love, self-respect, self-caring, self-trust, and self-protection. So that's an interesting stage. And it's kind of fun because they have the foundational aspects of mental health and have access to resources, whether it's through what they've learned or through me and our treatment or other folks who are resourceful and helpful to them. And lastly, the 11th stage is the self-driven perpetuation of self-love abundance. That is where everything comes together and you are just living your life as a self-love abundant person, never looking back at being SLDD, always being aware of the necessity of self-love to perpetuate self-love, to boundaries, to protect yourself, to learn, to explore, to try on and experiment, to build on a foundation of self-love abundance. So there you have it. Those are the 11 stages. That is my self-love recovery program. That is the codependency cure. You got it in about 35 minutes. 35 minutes, give or take. It's a quick rundown, but to get to be self-love abundant, to permanently eradicate, neutralize codependency or self-love deficit disorder, it's possible. But it requires a program that is like mine or is mine with a therapist that understands the building blocks that need to be addressed in order to get to the absolute difficult, most challenging part of your program, which is leaving the narcissist and learning to be by yourself without relapsing back into the next narcissist relationship. If you'd like to know more about any of this or more, just go to my website at selfloverecovery.com. I highly encourage you guys to check out my Patreon program. In Patreon, there are different subscription levels where you can get access to material and to advice, to videos, to exclusive content that no one else gets, but only to the people who subscribe to Patreon. I even have a Patreon subscription for psychotherapists. So thank you. Thank you very much for letting me talk about my 11th stage codependency cure or my self-love recovery treatment program. I hope it helped you understand, if you are an SLD or a codependent, that there's hope. and you don't have to do this alone. And that this program or some program like it can free you from the indentured servitude of forever being entrapped by a narcissist and the self-sabotaging voices in your own mind and your own heart that keep you there. Be well and take care.